I remember my dad going, "Where did we go wrong?" That just broke my heart, man, to hear him say that and the fact that I'm responsible for that just eats me up, man. It's so hard to let go of that shame and the guilt that comes with that. So
a journey filled with extreme highs, fame, status, and money, but on the other end, slipping into extreme lows filled with drug addiction, guilt, and shame. Our guest today is renowned Australian rapper 360. Where do you think the drive came from to start rapping and start doing all of this?
When I was 5, my dad started training me to play basketball. He kind of instilled this work ethic in me that was like, if you do something and you love it, you just go hard. To then apply that into everything, good and bad. Like I've applied it to sex, drugs, but then realizing later in life, it's like, okay, I've just got to get rid of all this negative stuff and apply the same sort of grind to everything that's positive.
You said, people mention the drugs I'm hitting, like you gotta be fucking kidding. How could someone do what I've done if they live in that junkie system?
I'd written that before the battle, and then during that battle I was actually high. Like that goes to show what happens when you're in there. Like I remember my 3rd album, I had an overdose, had to cancel the tour. It was like going on this upwards trajectory. Suddenly it started going like that, and then it just started going bang and going downwards, and that's when.
Just before we jump right into this episode, I need to take a minute to thank our sponsor of the podcast, Whoop, which is this thing that is on my wrist, and it's also the ultimate health and fitness tracker. It doesn't leave my wrist. The only time I take it off is when I'm changing the color of the band. This thing is the best companion when it comes to achieving your health and fitness goals. There's a couple of things that I love about the Whoop. One of the things is the sleep coach, because Whoop tracks my sleep and it gives me a score based on how well I've performed. And it also gives me so many other metrics, such as how much deep and REM sleep I got, how many times I woke up throughout the night. And I use all of these metrics to help improve my recovery, improve my sleep, so I can wake up feeling fresh to attack the next day's activities. I love this thing. And if you guys want to try out Whoop, you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to join.whoop.com/Chris, and you will get 1 month completely free, and they'll send you a band completely free. Once again, go to join.whoop.com/Chris, or hit the link in the show notes or the description below, and take your health and fitness to the next level with your best companion, Whoop. Let's get right into this episode. You guys enjoy. Matt, you said on a previous podcast that some advice you would give to the younger generation coming up would be to stay clear from social media and to try not to get caught up in this state of comparison to other people's lives online. Why do you think that's important, and why would you tell that to, say, your younger self and people coming up?
I think in the past for me, I've so often got caught up trying to live up to other people's like expectations, also seeing like other people that were successful in music and trying to emulate them and stuff like that, rather than just doing what was natural and what was organically myself. So I think there's that. I think social media, like, it really instills this kind of notion that the more followers you have or the more engagement you have, that makes you as a person. Like, it's good to have that, don't get me wrong. Like, everyone wants that. Everyone who's running a business and doing social media wants to have a thriving, like, social media, but don't place your worth in it. I think that's the important aspect of it, not to think that your identity lies in how good things are going.
And when the comparison piece, what do you mean by that? Like, do you feel like people compare, say, someone's social media, which is their highlight reel, to their reality, and that's where they get beaten up? Or why do you think it's important to not get caught in a state of comparison?
I think if you're comparing yourself to other people all the time, you're losing sight of your own journey. You know, like, you're always trying to measure up to someone who's got more followers, like, oh, I need to be more like them, or I need to rap more like them because they're more successful or something like that, instead of just embracing the real genuine version of yourself and just letting your own story play out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, instead of trying to emulate or compare yourself to someone else staying in their own lane, you stay in your own lane and create magic that's aligned with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, like like take us for example, I could be looking at your Instagram and seeing how many followers you've got and just being like, oh man, I want that so much. So I should start studying how you work and then emulating that, but that just wouldn't be genuine to who I am. And I think people can feel that when you start trying to copy other people instead of just being yourself, it can feel contrived.
Yeah. And have you struggled with that, I guess you could say, over the last, say, decade with social media? Have you struggled in comparison?
And I reckon I've struggled with that probably since I was a teenager. I feel like when I hit puberty, I became sort of consumed with trying to portray myself to seek other people's approval and try and be something that I wasn't. Like it was like my whole life has been a big identity crisis of trying to be something I wasn't at some stage. Like when I was young, it was like I was like a 14-year-old kid who comes from a great family, real middle class, loving family and that. But I was in the rap world, so I was trying to portray myself as this like gangster kind of dude who was like, you don't want to mess with him, and like just not who I was at all, you know, trying to be a thug, and I just wasn't that. And then throughout my life, it's been so many little moments of that. Like when my career took off, I remember I became so like my music became quite poppy, and when I became really successful, the rap world really disowned me. A lot of rappers were like, he doesn't make real rap, you know? He's not a real rapper, he's just a pop star, he's a sellout. So then I started like trying to tailor all my music to impress the rappers, you know what I mean? I started trying to emulate people who were real sick rappers, trying to win them over. And I sort of went through that, mixtures of that throughout my whole life. And I think over the last 5 years, I've just realized it's like, just got to get back to just being myself again, you know?
Why do you think you are constantly trying to prove yourself and do those? Because for me, I'm really fascinated by this thing where you say, I was in a great family, and I want to unpack what great family looks like in a bit, but like how can you be in a great family, but then you're constantly trying to prove yourself to people that are kind of like a lot different to your family, if that makes sense?
Yeah, like I think it was just having a low self-esteem and being quite self-conscious and wanting to fit in. And like when I was younger, I loved my family. Like I was never ashamed to run up and give my mum or dad affection in front of other people. But then when I became a teenager, I became consumed with like being cool, and that wasn't cool, you know? And so that's just where it started falling away.
What do you think drove you to wanting to become cool? And was it the people you were hanging out with, the school you went to, the area you grew up with? Like, what do you think led you to want to have this like cool nature about you, which is typically, and I'm assuming, more like rebellious and that kind of cool? Because if you go to like a nice posh private school, right, a cool kid would be like the jock, the sport guy. But maybe if you're in like a state school in a small town or something, then the cool thing's like the guy that steals and smokes and all of that. So what kind of led you down that path?
I think it was like trying to fit in. It was probably peer pressure, like thinking that when I was in year 7, I just wasn't cool. So it was like seeing all the older kids and how they would behave. And I was from a private school, but a lot of them were like kind of skaters in the graffiti scene and listening to rap. So I was like seeing that and seeing how the older people behaved, and was like, oh, I've got to start trying to emulate that. I've got to be like this loose kind of cannon, but it just wasn't me, man.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because when you look back at your life, that would have been quite a life-changing time for you. Because if you look at, you know, like the life that you've been on, all of the things like the rapping and, you know, different challenges with drugs and all the rest of it, like that little boy, like little Matt, that's torn between a good middle-class family, but then also this rebellious, cool kid. Like he could have gone 2 very different ways in that point. Have you ever reflected on how life-changing 14-year-old, 15-year-old you actually was to where you are today?
Yeah, I think as a teenager, you become so, well, I don't know if you were the same, but you just become very impressionable and easily swayed. And that just really stuck with me. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have social media in the mix going through puberty in those teenage years, like where there's so much importance placed on follower count and all that. Like you're already trying to seek that kind of thing. Well, I was in high school, you know, but then having social media in the mix for kids nowadays going through that, I can't imagine how much it would distort them. Did you go through that?
Yeah, I think the weird thing about social media is, well, it's not weird. It's just you're crazy until you make it, then you're a genius. And it's quite a common theme. So if you start posting content and you have 200 followers in school, you're not cool. You're far from cool. You start making raps, but you're like this little rapper that makes really crap music. You're not cool at school.
No.
But if you blow up and you have all this followers and credibility, you're cool. And so starting any new pursuit that eventually does become cool doesn't start cool.
No, man. In high school, oh man. Like I remember back then, rap music was not really listened to. It was like when I was in year 8 and stuff, it was like Korn and Limp Bizkit and stuff. And I really liked that at the time. And then when I got into rap music and started telling people, I was like so obsessed with it. It was like—
How old were you?
14. I lived and breathed it. It was like all I wanted to do apart from basketball at the time. And I remember like all my entire basketball team would just hang it on me for being a rapper. They call me all sorts. You can imagine what they say. And same thing at school, you know, like why are you doing this try hard American stuff, you know? That was the running theme. And it was just like, I think I loved it that much that I didn't care, which is interesting thinking back to how I wanted to fit in so badly. I was still I think I wanted to fit in with people who liked rap music. That was the thing.
It's this weird polarity though, because you're trying to fit in, but by doing the rap thing, you're not fitting in.
Yeah.
But you just said there at the end, you said you were trying to fit into the people that liked the rap music. So potentially the basketball crew was different to the rapping crew, and you weren't liked by the basketball crew because you were rapping, but hopefully you were going to be seen and liked by the rapping crew because you were getting into it. That might have been your lens as a young kid.
Yeah. But mind you, we was really close with all the basketball teams and that. Like we're all good mates, but that aspect of it was just like they hated it. Like it was not cool. And the same thing happened in school too.
Where do you think the drive came from to start rapping and start doing all of this? Like honestly, like why?
When I heard Eminem, I remember hearing Eminem for the first time and being like, this is corny. I do not like this. And then as I started searching rap more and realizing the technical aspect of it, I just became consumed with it. Like I just wanted to be the best rapper ever kind of thing. But it was like it really stemmed from the way I played basketball. Like my dad, when I was 5, my dad started like training me to play basketball. He would get me up before school. We'd train after school every single night. We were just like working towards this goal of being a basketballer. And he kind of instilled this work ethic in me that was like, if you do something and you love it, you just go hard. So I got conditioned to have that from a very young age, and I'm really, really grateful for that. You know, like there was times when it was quite difficult as a kid, just like always just focusing on basketball, and you know, dad was quite an intense guy as well, like really coaching me through that. But then to apply that into aspects, I've applied it to everything, good and bad. Like I've applied it to drugs, which is definitely bad, going all the way into that, and then but also health and fitness and positive things and work and drive and stuff like that. It's been good in that regard.
Yeah. So you think from an early age your dad helped you or allowed you or enabled you to develop this all or nothing mentality, I guess. Like on the drive over here, we were talking about that, how it's such a blessing and a curse. You can apply it to so much good, but you can also get caught in some really sticky situations. Do you think that's what happened to you when discovering rap, when discovering drugs, when discovering everything? Do you think that's just what happened? You developed this all or nothing where it was like, I'm either doing it or I'm not?
Exactly. It was like, no matter what it was, if I loved it, it was like, all right, I'm going all out. That's all I can do. And there was no balance really, which has been there's a curse to that, you know, but sex, drugs, everything going hard, but then realizing later in life, it's like, okay, I've just got to get rid of all this negative stuff and apply the same sort of grind to everything that's positive.
And I want to talk a bit more about that. But just before we do, I really want to unpack the family pillar to this, because just before you said that you grew up in a really good family. What did that look like? Like, what does good family mean to you?
So I wouldn't say it was perfect. Like there was definitely moments where it wasn't, but they did the best they could. Like my dad, man, he sacrificed so much to provide for us. He came from poverty, like crazy poverty, very traumatic childhood that just, I think most people, if they went through what he went through, would have probably stumbled and really hit the drugs or alcohol hard. But he was like, it's like he went through and saw his parents go through alcoholism and they died quite young. And he was like, okay, this is like I do not want this. Like I want to provide for a family. And he just was so dedicated to his work and his family that I could tell he was an accountant. He absolutely hated it, but it was such a good paying job and it was providing for his family that he just like busted his ass doing it every single day. It was destroying him. He was moody. He didn't enjoy it, but it was giving us a life that he couldn't have, that he didn't have. And mum was a stay-at-home mum and she raised us. But that, mind you, that also like they met when they were like 20, I think maybe even 18. And they got married really young. But then he had my brother, who's 2 years older than me, when he was 40. And my mum was 35. So they had kids late. They got all their living out the way, had kids late. And then we were just this, like I have such, my childhood is just like fairy tale memories, you know, like it was us playing basketball, going on holidays, and just felt like nothing could penetrate that world, you know.
Was your brother quite rebellious too? Were you influenced by him growing up?
Yeah, he went through his issues and stuff like that too, where we would like, it was like in our childhood, we would go along with what the family was doing. And then through the teenage years, would kind of be like, no, maybe I want to set my own path and go a bit to the other way, to the extreme. And then both of us luckily have come back together now.
Yeah, cool. And when you kind of embarked on this journey of music and being a bit more rebellious in hopes of becoming quite cool or considered cool, did you ever resent your parents for a while there where you were like, nah, I'm not doing this, I'm doing my own thing, and kind of have a rebellious approach to your life, but then also maybe project that onto parents? I find when people are kind of trying to pave their own way, a lot of the time they can resent family for that. Did you ever face that?
I don't think there was resentment, but I think there was a lot of rebelling for sure. Like it was like we were very much raised in a family where drugs and alcohol were a no-no. Like you don't even touch it. You don't go there. And then for me and my brother to sort of go down that path was very much a bit of a slap in the face to my dad. Mind you that we're our own people, we've got to figure out our own way. And I think he sort of come to realize that when we were growing up, that, you know, he's just got to let us live and he can't control every step we've got to take.
Yeah. Okay. Giving you a bit of independence, I guess you could say, and trusting in the process a bit can be hard for parents at times.
Yes. Yeah. Very hard for them to let go of that role of being a parent and a protector, like wanting to shield your kid from all that.
So when did it all start to take off and change for you? Like when did this music thing start to become a real thing? Like when was the moment where you're like, fuck, this is getting pretty serious?
Yeah, so it was over the course of like, it felt like probably like 7 or 8 years, going from like 16 rapping with Pez, and then in our early 20s when we put out the festival song, that was our first taste of success. That just blew up on the radio. And then like I never thought we could do it. Like Pez was always this guy who had this like desire never to work and just chase the dream of rap. And when he was like, dude, we can do this, we can be the biggest rappers in this country, forget work, just quit. I was like, okay. And I sort of just trusted him and went along with it, even though I didn't think it could happen. But then when that happened, it was like, okay, we can actually do this. And then I was like, I saw that and I just leaned in, man. I was like, all right, I'm going to write some of at the time, I thought they were the craziest goals I could think up, and started like visualizing them every single night and just like feeling like I was there and being like, yeah, this is definitely going to happen. And then everything that I wrote down on my goal list was like, I thought was massive. But when it all happened on my second album, it was like I far exceeded all of those things.
Mm. And so at that moment, the second album, things boomed, you exceeded all the goals that you set. Where were you at in your career-wise? Like, was it quite large? Like, how was your public figure, and how was the music when you were at that second album? Like, how was it for you?
So, man, it just went crazy, dude. Like the album went double platinum, which is 140,000, I think, which is just unheard of in Australia. And each single, like I was expecting to put the first 2 or 3 singles out and they would go gold, which is 30,000 sales. But we put out seven songs and each of them went either gold or multiple times platinum. I think Boys Like You has gone 6 or 7 times platinum now, which is hopefully it'll get to become a diamond record. So there was all these accolades just pouring in. It was like my life shifted from being this kid who was like always talking a big game, like I'm going to make it, living off Centrelink, and then suddenly bang, I was like launched into the spotlight. The fame was wild, man. I remember like I couldn't go anywhere when it first popped off. Like everywhere I would go, people would just be swarming. Kids, it was a lot of kids too. So they were like screaming and crying. They were chasing. I'd get in a car and they'd be chasing it, banging on it. It was so intense, man. And that, I thought I wanted that. Like when I was younger, I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Being famous and having all that money and stuff, that's all I really need. And then I got it, and it was like after a week that it was just really, I got tired of it, getting that attention everywhere. And especially when there's days where you're just not feeling it and you just want to be left alone, but people come up to you and they're fans of your music. So you've got to show love to them. Like I've never been someone who can just be like, I'm not feeling it, can you just leave me alone? I'd just be like, I have to turn it on. And so I'd kind of put on this show, and that was tough.
So when you say you got tired of it, like what did that look like? Like for you, like obviously feeling like you have to show up even on the days you don't want to, but was there anything deep in that? Like was there any realizations or anything in that moment where you were like, fuck up, I'm not sure if I want to do this?
I think it was very much people had this idea of who I was that I don't even think I was that. It might have been a bit of imposter syndrome where it's like I just felt there was this narrative in my head that none of these people like me. Like none of them actually care about me. If they really knew who I was, they wouldn't be doing this kind of thing. And that, I think that grew with me a lot. And like when, you get involved with chicks in relationships and stuff, I was constantly like, oh, they don't actually like me. They just want to be with me because of the attention it brings or something like that. And it caused this kind of almost like paranoia, I guess, like thinking no one was genuine.
Do you think you self-sabotaged in those moments because of those thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was very self-destructive. Like I was going through like a very big party phase when all the music took off, and then when it really took off and there was just all this endless money, it was like, all right, we can just keep partying. So I didn't really recognize that it was getting out of control until it was too far. Yeah.
And what year was this? Do you know?
I believe it was, I think 2008 is when our festival song came out, and I think 2011 was when the album came out and everything started popping off.
Right. So 2011 was when the rap battle with Cursor happened, right? Yeah. That was when that rap battle happened, and like obviously that blew up and went crazy, and people still make clips about that stuff to this day, reminiscing on those times, which is thinking about that's 14 years ago now, which is wild. But in that rap battle, in like the second round, you said something, I'm going to quote it. You said, people mention the drugs I'm hitting like, you got to be fucking kidding. How could someone do what I've done if they live in that junkie system? But unlike you, I decided to grow some balls, get clean, and start making a fucking difference. So you quoted that in a rap in 2011, and that would have been obviously in the heat of everything going really well. How does that sit with you when I read that back?
That makes me cringe, bro. Yeah, that is when I wrote that, right? I had gone through a tour where I tried to stop drinking, and I didn't think I had an alcohol problem. I tried to stop and I got sick. I went through withdrawals and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, feeling all this anxiety and this physical sickness from trying to stop. So I stopped drinking. So I was like talking about that, but I had written that before the battle. And then during that battle, I was actually high. Like, I remember going to a pharmacy and getting on codeine before that battle to try and calm myself down, because I was like, I can't do this, you know? And so I was rapping that whilst high.
Fuck.
Yeah.
And
that goes to show what happens when you're in there. Like, at the time I wrote that was a true thing that I thought would be really cool. But then turns out I'm rapping it and it's actually a complete lie. Like, you go through a web of lies like that when you're in addiction.
So, like, do people know, or are you hiding all of this?
Hiding it all. At the start, no one knew. Like, people knew that I was a loose dude. I'd love partying. I'd go on big benders for multiple days with a lot of drinking involved, a lot of coke and stuff like that. Even harder drugs like meth. I'd dabble in that, but not go too. Oh, I did go pretty hard, but not to the point it became an addiction. But it was when I was coming down and those hangovers that I would start using prescription drugs like OxyContin and stuff like that just to get through it. No one knew that.
Right. So what ended up being the downward spiral and the thing that caused you the most grief drug-wise was the things that you were taking on the come down, not actually the partying on the weekend.
100%. Yeah, it was all the prescription stuff like Valium and Xannies and stuff. I got prescribed. I was getting anything I wanted.
How?
I just was very manipulative with this doctor. I was like spinning a yarn to him the whole time. It was, looking back, it was pretty pathetic. Like, I was going in there crying to him and like telling him my back was sore and stuff, and he was just giving me all this stuff, and yeah, it was bad, man.
It's Monday morning, and you know what that means? It means that I just got my Papa Macros delivery for the week, and Papa Macros has been an absolute game changer for me, and let me tell you why. If you guys have been following along, you would know that I am doing a Hyrox competition this month, so with the increase in training load, I also need to increase the amount of food that I'm eating, but when you tie that in with all the other commitments I have, like running this show, I only have so many hours in a day, and Papa Macros has been a game changer for me because I'm getting these meals that I can rest easy knowing that they're nutritious, they're delicious, but extremely convenient as well. But let's have a look in this box and see what we have for dinner and lunch this week. Some of my favorites from this week is the chimichurri steak. We have the rump steak and jasmine rice, the salmon poke bowl. This one is amazing. The Cajun chicken, and the great thing about all of these meals is the portion sizes are like no other. It is so hard to find a meal prep company that actually gives you enough food to make you feel full, and Papa Macros definitely doesn't shy away from that. So if you want to take the cooking out of your hands and still remain to have nutritious, delicious, and convenient meals, then look no further than Papa Macros. I love these things, and I'm sure you will too. So hit the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to papamacros.com.au and use the code Chris Griffin at checkout, and you'll get 10% off your entire order. Once again, hit the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to papamacros.com.au and use the code Chris Griffin at checkout. Let's get right back to the show. So how do you feel in a moment where you're spitting this rhyme on a rap battle, a blatant lie? Like, what's going on in your mind then? Do you feel bad and horrible about yourself? Do you like what's going on in that time? Do you know?
In that time, I was just so focused on the battle that it was like, I didn't even feel like I was lying. I probably even believed it, man. You know what I mean? Like, you get so used to telling yourself these lies that it's not a problem. What I'm doing isn't a problem. So even though I might have used, I'm not addicted. So it's like, it's not that big of a deal. That's kind of the running theme of it.
So obviously the rap battle is the public facing thing that people see. But then you've got to then go after that, go home. And I don't know if you're alone or with someone, but like you go home and have to deal with this private noise inside your head. Is this quite a negative thought that's going on in your head after something like that? Like, does it hit you, or do you still in that moment go, oh, I just destroyed this guy, I won, and you're still in this space of like, doesn't matter if I lied?
I think I was so governed and dictated by trying to build my reputation and trying to build my status that I wasn't really caring about that aspect of my life. I was like, whatever I have to do to make it, whatever I have to do to become successful, famous, and get money, that was all that really mattered. So if I have to lie about my addiction and stuff like that, that wasn't bothering me at that point.
And why do you think you felt the need to be famous, successful, all of that? When like, because clearly if you wrote something like this, you know the importance of being sober, clean, and making a difference. So you know the importance because you've wrote about it, unless it's you're writing it going, no, this is bullshit, but I doubt it. You actually believe that. It was just a challenge sticking to it. So if you know that that's important, where do you think the drive's coming from to go against that and go, I'm going to do whatever it takes to become famous and rich?
I think it was like, I just really wholeheartedly believed that becoming famous, getting that status, getting all the money, that was what was going to fix everything that was going on with me. And I thought, even before there was anything going on, I was like, that is the answer to life. That is what's going to make me satisfied. That's what's going to make me happy. It's kind of the cliche story of like, once I get that, I'll be fine. Once it'll be that, it'll be good, you know, but it was just never good.
And did you ever get to a point where you were like, fuck, I got it. I got the thing that I was chasing?
Yeah. I remember when Falling and Flying blew up and like we were getting like all these plaques from the label, and it was just like, it actually happened. Like I remember talking to mum and dad because back in the day when I was, when I quit my apprenticeship, they were like, you've got to get a real job. You can't just do music. And I was like, I promise you it can happen. We can do it if you just give us some time. And my brother like hyped me up. He's like, just let him do it. He's got something. So to be able to, when that happened and to be able to see it and be like, I told you I did it. And they were like, wow, you actually did exactly what you said.
What about internally though? Because you realized that wasn't the thing that's going to make you happy and solve all of your life's problems. You still had drug addictions and things like this. Like, how were you feeling internally when you had got the thing that you thought was going to solve all your problems? Yeah,
I didn't realize that. At the time, I just thought I needed more. It was like, okay, I've got it. I've reached all these accolades. That feels amazing, but quickly that wore off. And then it was like, all right, on to the next one. I've just got to keep going. And it's like constantly filling that void that is never fillable.
The irony in that though, right, is like, if that's your pattern, then there actually isn't a destination that makes you happy. Because if you get there and you're tricking yourself that this place is, which is the next mountain to climb, and then this place is when you get there, it almost makes me question what I'm trying to unpack here is where the self-sabotage kicks in and where it happens to the point where you spiral into really deep lows. Is it potentially this realization of I've just achieved something great, still not happy, what the fuck is life? Let's destroy it. Where do you think the self-sabotage really kicks in and why do you think it's there?
I think it was like going back to that imposter syndrome. Like, yeah, I've got all this stuff. People I think when you become in the spotlight, and I think you would probably experience this, people put you on a bit of a pedestal and think you're above them or above other people because you've got a following or you've done stuff that is kind of awesome, you know, and seeing that and when that happens in the background, I think in the background in my head, I'm just like, nah, I'm not this, I'm a scumbag, you know. But it was like while I had those things, that was getting pushed down. So when those things started fading away, that came to the surface and then suddenly I didn't have those things and it was like, oh, I actually am a scumbag. So I don't have these things anymore. They were what was defining my happiness. That was all I was working for. And suddenly when that's gone, what else do I have? I might as well just destroy everything.
And so does this tie into when the career or the hype around your name and your brand starts to die off? Is this what you're saying? Like you're identified with that success and then when it dropped off, you didn't really feel like you had anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like I remember my third album, I had an overdose, had to cancel the tour. Suddenly everything was like going on this upwards trajectory. Suddenly it started going like that. And then I'm like trying to win it back, going on tour again, trying to put out more stuff. And then it just started going bang and going downwards. And that's when it was like, oh, okay, now I'm no longer defined by that. I'm defined by my addiction and what's going on in my head.
Is that because it was a public thing? Because you overdosed and it became public, you were like, fuck, all right, everyone knows I have a problem.
Yeah, I think it was that. And just like, I think spending so much time in addiction, you just like ignoring whatever is causing you to use in the first place. And I don't even think I understood it then. I just thought I was partying and it just got out of control. But then when I spent like years in therapy, I really unpacked it and got to the bottom of why I was doing it.
And what were those things you unpacked? Because it's interesting, like you're saying how in the moment you don't realize it. You trick yourself and think, oh, I'm just probably partying a little bit too much, but you think it's much deeper than that. What were some of the things that you've discovered?
There was some stuff from when I was younger that was like a big aspect of it that it's pretty gnarly though. Won't really go into it.
No, that's fine.
That there was an aspect of that. I'd also like become a massive people pleaser. Like I was so afraid of confrontation and standing up for myself that I think that was another aspect of where I lost a lot of respect for myself, because you spend years like not standing up for yourself that you eventually get to the point where you lose respect for yourself. It's like, someone will walk all over you and take advantage of you. You won't pull them up on it. And then you'll look at yourself like why wouldn't you stand up for yourself? Like have some respect. And then over the course of the years, when you just don't do it, that just, you get to the point where you like lose sight of who you are as a person. You're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. So I got to that point, and was like, I need to figure out who I am. Like, what values do I have? What do I stand for? And going through that process was tough.
Someone I spoke to a few months ago on the podcast spoke about tattoos and how it can be a form of self-sabotage in a sense, but also a form of like instant change in identity when they don't like who they see. For you, you've got obviously a lot of tattoos in very visual places like your face. Do you feel like you got tattoos and started on that journey just because you like tattoos, or do you think it's much deeper than that?
I think it was a mix of both. I was like I really liked them, but they also became a bit of a defense mechanism, a bit of a way of like putting on some sort of armor, you know?
What do you mean by that?
I guess like I'm not someone who's hard. I'm not someone who's a fighter. I'm not someone who will just smash people and that, but I always wanted to be that when I was younger. And then suddenly I'm launched up into the spotlight and the tattoos kind of give that effect. And there's a little bit of that going on. I've had them removed. Like I've got scars on my face because had all these tattoos there that were like too much. Like, and
on your face, more than what you have now.
Yeah, 5 years ago, I was like, I remember getting out of rehab and just looking at myself, man. I had like the Nirvana logo, like I think it was right there right there, the little smiley face. And I had this line with this semicolon on it and stuff. And it was like, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like disgusted with myself. I was like, I've got to get that off like right now. So I just went and they cut it out. It wasn't like a laser thing where they usually laser it. They just cut around the tattoo and then sewed it together. that's how badly I wanted it gone, you know. And same thing here. You can't really see the scar here because it's like they did it so well, but I just wanted it gone.
So that the scars on your face are from removing tattoos.
Yeah. And I had a mole here as well that I got cut out. So there's 2. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, man. It shows how sick I was. Like, bruh, I just remember looking at myself in the mirror, and just looking at myself, I was so overweight too. And I was just like, you've just spent your life trying to just be this person that you're not. Your whole identity is just being consumed by trying to impress other people instead of just being yourself. And I was just like, was at that point I was like, I've just got to be me.
Mm. How does that make you feel revisiting that thought?
Oh man, you can hear it in my voice. It makes me feel very kind of emotional, but just a bit cringy.
What do you mean by cringy?
I just wish that I had been myself and just embraced who I was rather than constantly trying to fit in.
Mm. Mm. It's interesting because it's this common theme of trying to fit in with, you know, a lot of things that we've been talking about today, all different parts in your journey. And it's like you have these realizations that you're trying to fit in, but then you still keep trying to fit in with different things. And the tattoo thing's interesting. Have you reflected any more on those things? Like the visual representation, obviously building up this shield of, oh, I look like I'm tough, I can fight or whatever, even though you're not. Like, have you reflected on reasonings behind getting certain tattoos or anything?
Well, when I got them, they were all kind of based in stuff that I liked when I was a child, which is really interesting. Like, I've got all these video game stuff up my arm, and it just reminds me of when I was a child. And same with Ninja Turtle here and stuff like that. And I feel like that's almost quite interesting. It's like I was yearning to be that kid that I was back in the day before I started caring about what other people thought. So to have these little mirrors showing that is quite interesting.
Wow. So you molded into someone that potentially you weren't as proud of, and you wanted to get things on you to remind yourself that you are still that fun kid, but you can also reminisce and look back at those times by having it on your body. Fascinating.
Yeah, it isn't that fascinating, man. I've never put that together. Wow.
And because we look at tattoos, I had someone else, CJ Bloomfield, on, and he was the head of a bikie gang, and he got sentenced 27 years in prison. And
whoa.
They dropped it was solitary confinement as well, and they dropped the 2 mandatory charges of his thing. So he only spent 2 years, but he spent 2 years in solitary confinement. And during that 2 years, he found God, firstly, but secondly, he developed a love for acting. And he was in the cell looking at the graffiti on the walls, and he was pretending they were cameras and practicing his acting in solitary confinement. He was just praying and practicing acting.
Whoa.
And he got out, and he's this 6'5" black guy that's looks scary. He's got knuckle busters tatted on his wrist and stuff. He's the kindest guy you'll ever meet. And 2 years later, he out of solitary confinement. He can't get any job because he's a criminal. But he lands his first acting gig with Chris Hemsworth and Mad Max Furiosa, and films Mad Max 2 years after getting out of solitary confinement.
Whoa.
And I look at these things because I look at, say, this. His upbringing was filled with crime. His dad gassed out his home, and you can look at his upbringing and go, it makes so much sense how he's led down to where he is today. But now he overcomes this, and he's used that as fuel, and he's grateful for everything he's experienced, and he's made something good out of it. He's a very calm person. You can tell he's been through a lot of chaos because of how calm he is. But then I look at your story, and it's not that. It's no, he was the tough guy. And he was the head of the bikie gang, and he had knuckle busters tatted on his wrist because he was the guy that probably killed people. And you're getting tattoos of Mario Kart to look tough, but then at the same time go back to your childhood. It's such an interesting thing. Do you look back at that, and is there anything that you reminisce or think about the decisions that you've made? And do you ever ponder on things like this?
Yeah, I do, man. Like when I was how old was I? I was probably a teenager, and I was getting into rap music, but also exploring other genres of music. I got really, really into reading autobiographies by like Anthony Kiedis and the Motley Crue and dudes like that who were full on rock stars, but they were junkies, like heroin addicts, the worst you could be. And like Nikki Sixx from the Motley Crue has been crazy story. And I romanticized that. So that was when I was a teenager. I was like looking up to these dudes who were rock stars but heroin addicts and going, that's what I want to do. And then so when it started taking off, I was just like, I'm actually in the position where I can do that now. And I just lent in. I remember like my brother being like, dude, you got to be careful. This is gonna be hard to get over this once you cross the line into addiction. I was like, I'll be fine, man, And then I wasn't.
When your brother's giving you that advice, is that from past experience? Because he's only 2 years older than you, right? How can he know in that lens, mate, if you get past this line, it's going to be very hard?
I think he was battling his own issues with that, and then seeing me made him freak out. Oh no, he's going to go down this path too. Yeah.
Why do you feel like the need to idolize these people that are heroin addicts but supposedly successful in some regard?
I think it was like this attraction to them being seen as like gods, to people because they're so successful and they're musicians and they're super creative, but at the same time fallen. I found something poetic about it. I don't know.
It just fascinates me because poetic, like how do you look at them and find that poetic,
The juxtaposition of having extreme highs while battling extreme lows at the same time. And I think going through that process of like expressing that while you're making music I think that's really poetic, man. Like being able to go through stuff that is just like so dark, but express it through music is really cool.
Did you have that lens when you were in the moments, and do you think it created this want and desire for you to go through lows? I'm going to pause this show for just 1 minute to talk about anti-aging and longevity, more specifically some of the supplements that I've been taking every single day to stay on top of my health, to make me feel younger and more youthful for longer. And the two products I've been taking every single day by Melrose Future Labs is the NAD Booster and the Muscle Protein Complex. This booster contains nicotinamide riboside, which is a precursor to NAD+, which is responsible for cellular renewal in the body, making sure that you can renew your cells better as time goes on, making you age less. And I take a capsule of that every single day. And then the other one is the Muscle Protein Complex by Melrose Future Labs. And there's an ingredient in this which blows my mind and makes it so much different than every other protein on the market. And it's got calcium HMB, which helps you maintain muscle mass even when your training load decreases, which is absolutely crazy. If you guys want to try out any of these products, you can go to the link in the description below. And if you use code Chris Griffin, you'll get a discount off your entire order alongside all of the other amazing anti-aging products. Once again, go to the link in the description below or go to melrosefuturelabs.com.au and you can use code Chris Griffin to get a discount off your order. Let's get right back to the show. Did you have that lens when you were in the moments, and do you think it created this want and desire for you to go through lows?
Oh, I tell you what, man. I remember I can't remember what the line was, but I started when I was younger, I started realizing when I was going through real darkness and really painful situations and I was rapping about it, people were connecting with it more. I loved that kind of music myself. So I was like, in my subconscious, I was praying for tragedy. I was like, I want things to go bad so then I can channel it into music. I think that was a common thread.
Well, how's that for a frame though? Is the music is better when you're in a low. So subconsciously, if you want to succeed in the line of work that you're in, which is music, go in more lows and you'll make better music. So then you can succeed more. But then the weird cycle of that is you're succeeding more externally and in the line of work that you've chose to pursue. However, personally and how you view yourself when you look in the mirror is probably never been worse. And so then this weird polarity between the high that people are viewing you as and idolizing you, but then the way that you view you, the self-esteem piece is like shocking and shot through the floor. So then you probably self-sabotage even more and spiral down into these lows. But all you're trying to do is create better music and progress in your career. But a byproduct of that is like spiraling down into extreme lows. And
it's like having living two lives almost, like having a foot in both worlds where like people on the outside think you're killing it and you must be loving life and you must be all good. But on the inside, you're just perishing.
Do you think that's where this lesson for the younger generation to not compare comes in?
100%. Yeah. I'd love to influence kids to not go down that same path that I went down of just like thinking what is more important. The most important thing in the world is to be accepted by people.
You kind of, when comparing a highlight reel, I want to challenge the thought of not comparing at all for 1 second, because I think comparison's not all bad. It can be used for bad, but it can also give you belief that it's possible. And that can be a fuel. I think it's just important to realize the cost of what they're doing. And so being able to compare your life is great, but just not comparing just their highs to your whole reality is important. So looking at someone that's doing something amazing and go, I want that, but let's just zoom out for a little second and actually what is the cost that they have to deal with to go through that?
True.
And so same example, like even looking at me doing a podcast, having a successful show. My show is quite like deep, educational. It's like we're trying to unpack different philosophies and learn new things to help people understand life a bit better in a sense, right? So there's a lot of deep thought that comes with it. People might listen and go, oh, I wish I could articulate things the way that Chris does. And they idolize or maybe pedestal the ability to communicate. But then what they don't do is go, okay, what's the cost to that? And one of the costs is peace of mind at times. Like when I'm trying to sleep at night, sometimes my mind's racing because I'm overthinking things or thinking a lot of things, right? But a byproduct of being very overthinking and think a lot is I come to a lot of conclusions and I can probably articulate something a bit better because I understand it more. And so this is just one little example in my lens of going, you compare what they have, which is good, but you don't understand the cost. And understanding the price tag to achieve the greatness in whatever field you're trying to achieve is really important. So then you know what you're buying. Because if you're looking at it in the lens of going, I want what these guys have. They have this massive music and they're achieving great things. Yeah, they have a little bit of addiction problems, but like they've got the amazing things and I don't really know how bad the addiction is. It's probably fine. It's bearable. They're successful. So without understanding the cost, you embark on the journey, but then you get swept up in their problems and then you get there and you go, fuck, I don't know if I want to pay this cost to achieve this life.
Yeah, like I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
And I think you're right too. Like there's a healthy comparison. Like I think when I was coming up and was like obsessed with Eminem's music because he was so technically good, wanting to be as technically good is probably a good thing. You know what I mean? But it's like, I think it was when I talk about that, be careful with the comparison stuff. It's more thinking that I'm not good enough because I'm not where they are. That was more the aspect the point I'm trying to get at. You know, like thinking that the status or their ability to do that makes me worthless or worth less, you know?
Yeah, I get that. And would there be any advice you'd give to your younger self that was starting out rapping? Is there anything that you would say to him more from like a concern, or would you warn him about anything specifically before he dove into wanting to become a massive artist?
Yes, 100%. I would be like, always trust your intuition and your instincts. Because there were so many moments, man. I remember when my career took off, suddenly launched into the stratosphere and had all these major labels around me and all these production crews and stuff. And I was so new to it all. I was like, they must know better than I do. Like they're like making all these decisions about how to market my music, and they're telling me how to behave and the type of person to be. So I'm thinking, yeah, they're probably right because they've been in this industry for so long. But I remember reflecting back and being like, if I had have just followed what my gut was actually saying at those moments, I think my career would have gone in different places.
In what way?
So like, say for example, I'm putting this album out, right? If I was putting this album out when I was 23 and just launched into the industry, I would be listening to the label when they would say, okay, we want to go with these songs. These are the singles that we're going to release. And I would just go along with that. Where now I've gotten to the point where it's like, I know what songs I've got to put out because it's whatever the ones are my favorites. Whatever my intuition is like, they're the ones that have got to come out. That's where I'm going in with now.
Mm. Do you think, because one of the common themes that throughout this convo and throughout your life that I've found is like this identity crisis, as you said at the start, you're having like a constant identity crisis. Do you think you're understanding more about yourself and having a better understanding on your identity, which allows you to be able to trust your gut and go, okay, no, I'm going to release these songs and these are the songs that I want to release and these are the main ones?
Yeah, I think like the last 5 years has been that process of being like, okay, I'm just embracing myself now rather than just trying to be cool and fit in or like seek validation and stuff like that. I think also the faith aspect of it, like I didn't know what my identity was for so much of my life. And I feel like now that I've found faith, my identity is quite secure in God. And it's interesting going from being a big people pleaser to becoming Christian is, man, it really, people react to it. People get quite hostile when you talk about Jesus and stuff like that. Like I totally get it too, because I used to be the same. Like even just mentioning the word God, sin and stuff like that, it carries so much weight and baggage. But now I've gotten to the point where I would have, like in the past, I would have never been confident to talk about Christ and stuff like that because everyone would be just like, oh, we don't want to hear about that, put the wall up. But now it's like I'm okay with that. If people don't want to listen to my music or don't like me anymore because of that, that's totally fine. They can do that. I'm secure in that identity in God.
Mm. What happened 5 years ago for you to, you've referred to like the last 5 years as being this journey of this. What happened 5 years ago for you to want to make change?
Going to rehab in 2020. I was in there for like 4 months and getting off methadone and all these hectic benzodiazepines. It was just like my life was a mess. It was spiraled out of control, and I was just like, I need to get my life together. Like I'm 30, however old I was then. I'm 38 now, and it's like I'm reaching my mid-30s and waking up going, I'm nearly 40 and I can barely be responsible for myself. I can't take care of myself yet. And it was just like this realization of like, I think also letting down my parents, wanting to, I think in the past I've kind of almost disrespected the sacrifice my father made, and getting to the point where I want to honor him now. That's been a big shift, and that started the journey 5 years ago.
Mm. And how do you think it spirals to get to as low as it did? Like, how do you think it gets to that? So 5 years ago, when you're at this extreme low and decide it's time to go into rehab, like, how do you think it got to that point? Do you know?
It was a lot of the drug taking was just so out of control. I think a lot of the people pleasing as well was just getting just wore me down to the point, like I said before, it was like I lost sight of who I was. And when I went to rehab, I was just like, man, I was just had no idea who I was. I was not confident to speak up and put my foot down in situations. So it was like, all right, I've got to build my life back now. That was that real turning point.
And when you went into rehab, did you have certainty that you were, all right, it's time to make change, it's time to get on top of things? Or did you keep relapsing while you were in rehab, or how did that all look for the 4 months you were there?
Man, it wasn't flawless. Like I was ready to stop, but I still had all these habits that I had that when I feel bad and when I'm going through withdrawals, I need to escape it. I just can't live with it. You know, I can't deal with the suffering that comes with withdrawals. So I was in there and I was talking a good game. I remember being about it to everyone else. I'm ready to stop. I'm ready to be clean. But I'd be going down and because they were weaning me off Valium. So I'd have a certain, like every couple hours I'd go and get dosed up and they'd slowly wean me off it. But I remember going to the nurse and like putting them in my pocket and going up to my room and like storing them where no one could find them and then just having a whole bunch of them to make me feel something during the day. So it was like, that was like, well, just another thing that I was like, I'm not really ready to stop yet. And then I got out and even that wasn't a flawless run. I was like, I'd gotten off the methadone, I'd gotten off the clonazepam, which is the benzodiazepine. And I remember for the first, I think it was about 5 or 6 months, I was like a mess, man. And I was so raw and just feeling withdrawals that I was like, I'm not ready to go through this. I was like not strong mentally. I was not healthy. I was sick. So I was like, because I'd just gotten out of rehab, I was like I wasn't going to go do drugs. I wanted to go drink, but I couldn't go do that because I know my family would see that and they would be able to tell that I was drunk. So this is shit. But I was drinking Listerine, man. Like I was swigging Listerine because it had alcohol in it, which is a horrible type of alcohol, really unhealthy for you. But I was just swigging it down, drinking it, and that would sort of numb me for a bit. So I was starting doing that every day. And then I was just like, okay, this is bad. I need to stop doing this before this becomes something. Otherwise, like it's just getting worse and worse. So I went to the doctor, told him what was going on. They put me on this medication that helped. And then the last 4 years has been about getting off all that stuff, and I'm almost off. Like I was on like 6 or 7 medications, and I've got 2 left.
You were quite like shaky when explaining those times. They must have been quite low for you 4 years ago. Man,
it's just like to go through that. There's so much shame there. I think about like. I just think about my parents a lot and what they've gone through and how supportive they've been, but just how constantly I would fall. But regardless, they were always still there. But to I hate the fact that like they've taken it so personally. Like they're like, I remember my dad going, "Where did we go wrong?" And that just broke my heart, man, to hear him say that when
Take your time, man.
Yeah, to hear my dad say that when he hasn't done really anything wrong, like none of the drug taking and none of the addiction was his fault. It was all my stuff. But of course, being parents, they're going to be like, where do we go wrong? You know, that was just a constant thing they would ask. And man, when I went to rehab for 4 months, like I remember going in and getting out, and I saw my mum, and she looked like she'd aged like 10 years in that time. And I just felt this, like, I'm responsible for that, you know? That's my psychotic kind of self-destructiveness has like caused that to happen. And the fact that I'm responsible for that just eats me up, man. It's so hard to let go of that shame and the guilt that comes with that. So that's been a huge part of it, is getting on top of it to show them that, you know, they haven't failed, and that, you know, I want to make them proud. Like, I've made them proud before, but I want them to know that when I'm going away and doing trips like this, that I'm not going to be just going and destroying myself, you know? And it's been really beautiful over the last few years to reconnect with them. So, 'cause like, they all live at my joint with me. My parents are with me. My brother's at mine. And I go for a walk and have coffee with them every morning. Every night we have dinner together. And then, like, I'll spend the night watching movies or TV shows with mum or with my dad, depending on what day it is. And those last 4 or 5 years has been just epic to bond with them again and to develop a relationship with them that is less them being the parent and having to take care of me and me fixing myself and being able to take care of myself again, which has been really cool because they've been able to just be like, oh, he's all good now. Especially since coming to faith, they can see that there's a real huge shift as soon as that happened. It's been a big shift to just wanting to do things right.
Do you think they're a big driver for all the success you're striving towards now?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, they're so important to me, and their happiness, and they're going through old age now. So I want to make sure that they are sorted. Like, I don't want them to worry for anything. I want to give the support that they gave me to them. Yeah.
It's quite powerful, and I just want to commend you for all of that. Like, you can really see that it means a lot to you, and it's such a powerful driving force, and like, it's going to be the thing that stands the test of time. And I'd imagine that, like, that fuel there is what allows you to keep going when you have these hard times where when you're like questioning going to resort back to drugs or different things. Or if you have times where there's thoughts of relapsing, you've got that driver, and then you've obviously got your faith and God as well to lean on. And those are two pretty powerful forces for you to keep going, I'd imagine.
Man, they are, for sure. It's like, I think I might have said it to you before. It was like, I could easily just manipulate myself and lie to myself with just no thought. I was so used to it. It came so easily that I'd almost be believing what I was saying. And as soon as coming to God, it was like, I can't lie to him. Like, there's like this knowing that I'm manipulating myself. That's fine, but I can't manipulate him because he knows, you know? And that's been a big shift. Yeah.
So what, in the sense that, like, you could lie to yourself easily, but now when you lie, you feel like you're lying to God too, and he knows, but he doesn't. He knows, he can see your bullshit.
100%.
And so for you feel like, I can't lie anymore.
Yep, that's it. And it's like I think about over the last probably year and a half as I've been going on that walk, like praying and then just where it's gotten to now, like I remember there has been times where I would take like, because I'm prescribed Valium to sleep and I've been slowly weaning off that and I've got it down to like almost off it. And I would take it, sometimes I would take it during the day let's just take it during the day. But then it's gotten to the point where it's like, even just trying to convince myself that that's okay, I can't do that anymore. I just get riddled with this, like it eats at me, you know. I know that I'm lying to him, and he, like, there's an ultimate truth there. Yeah.
Mm. So you said you're down to 2 different medications now. Do you have the confidence in that, and through your relationship with God and the things that are driving you, have the confidence that you are going to be able to fade off these things and eventually get to the other side? Or do you have doubts still?
No, I don't have doubts now. I feel so ready to do that, in the sense that, like, when I was going to rehab, I was like, I'm ready to stop, but I wasn't happy. I was such a mess still. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm really healthy, I'm really happy, and I feel like there's an actual purpose to my life that when I go through this now, I feel actually ready to face and just look the devil in the eye. But I think it's almost like, man, I was on methadone, right? Which is such a strong drug.
What's methadone?
It's like a drug replacement for heroin. So instead of taking heroin, you take, there's 2. So there's this one called Suboxone, which I was on that, but you can't get high on that. It just makes you not go through withdrawals. And so I manipulated my doctor. I was like, I want to feel something. So I said, I think I should try methadone. I don't know how I even got him to agree to it. And then I was on methadone, and that was the beginning of the end. Like, I started abusing that, getting high on that. And so when I got out of rehab and I had those issues where I was drinking a Listerine and that, they put me back on the Suboxone one, which you can't get high off. And then I was doing that and everything was going well. And the doctor was like, oh, there's this new one where it's the same drug, but they inject it in your stomach, and you take like 3 injections and then you're able to stop, and you don't have to go through withdrawals, because it's like in your stomach, these little balls, but they wean off so gradually and so slowly that you don't have to go through the withdrawals. So I was on that for probably a year and a half and just stopped it, and I've been able to get off that drug without any issues. So I don't think there's that risk of being in such, because the withdrawals from methadone are so bad. It's like deep paranoia, anxiety, depression, nonstop. You just can't sleep. Like, I don't think I slept properly for like 4 months while I was in rehab. It was just like half an hour every night, and just feeling so scattered all the time. And to actually, man, it's a miracle drug to be able to have stopped that and not go through that withdrawal process is a blessing.
Do you think you build up like a resentment and a hate towards drugs because of everything you've been through because of it?
Now, definitely. Like, back in the day, it was such a euphoric feeling. It was like, man, it was just like every time I do it, I was like, yeah, this is why I do this. Like, it feels so good, but it doesn't last very long. And then when you're out of it, it's so putrid. Like, yeah, it's turned to the point where I despise it, man.
Mm.
And it's very powerful. It has a strong grip on you. Like I've been battling it for so long now, but there's people out there that actually never stop, you know, especially when they're addicted to things like ice. Like that one, man, I've seen people just start that and they just cannot stop no matter what, and it just takes their soul.
Mm. And do you think moving forward with your new album that's coming out and, you know, music being another priority again, it's back on the forefront, you're trying to make good music and release good songs and pick up that momentum a little bit. Are you doing things in a different way now than you have before? Have you got any new approach to your music and to what you're trying to achieve? And is it a different approach to music now than it was before?
Yeah, so that element of like trying to appease the rappers, trying to impress people who didn't like me has completely gone now. So this whole album was real liberating in that respect. It's like everything on this has just been like, okay, I'm not going to try and emulate someone else. I'm just doing me. And that you can hear it in this. It's like the whole album is very positive in that regard. You can feel that I'm on the verge of like really conquering a lot of the stuff I've been going through.
That's cool. And does that feel quite liberating? Is it quite a empowering thing to feel, having that new lens, because it hasn't always been that way?
100%, man. It's like everything was seeking approval and placing my identity with like my happiness was dictated by where my music went. I remember I used to release music and like all day I'd just be like watching the YouTube feed, refreshing it, reading every comment and stuff like that, clocking all the views, and however it went would dictate how I felt, you know? And now that we've been releasing music, like we've put out one song, another one tomorrow, that desire to constantly be checking it has gone. It's just like, whatever happens, happens. I do check, don't get me wrong. Like I check it every now and then, but not like I was. It's not like my identity was placed in how good or bad it goes.
Yeah, I think obviously what happens with that though, it's the same with social media views and growth and all the rest of it, is when things are blowing up, it gets really exciting and you do get addicted to that chase because the dopamine you feel when you get it is insanely euphoric, right? So it's natural that you look at things like when you get a viral something, you're refreshing and you're looking at the views and you're engaging in it a lot more. And I think that's just a natural feeling. And the more things like kind of plateau out a little bit, they get less exciting. And then so you don't feel the need to check it because you're not getting the dopamine hit as much. In fact, if it's not getting as many views as it used to, you might be more disheartened. So you refrain from checking. It's a natural thing that I feel like most people feel when they're dealing with analytics that validate your social status.
Yeah, there's been that, but like the Spotify views on this latest song we've dropped have actually been really, really good compared to like other stuff that I've done in the past, and I still feel quite detached from it. Like I love that it's doing well and I want it to do well, but I don't feel like my happiness is dictated by it.
That's great.
Yeah,
I think it's awesome. And fast forwarding to now, you've mentioned a few things. Obviously, you got the album coming out, and you've, on the up, which is so amazing and it's so cool to see. What would you say some of the big challenges you're still facing with now that you're trying to overcome, or is there anything that you're still facing, or do you have any challenges day to day now that you're trying to overcome?
Yeah, there's like, that guilt and shame that I was talking about. Like a lot of that was washed away when I really believed in the gospel. But there is still times where that, just like today in that discussion, where it comes up and will eat at me. And I'm sure because we've spoken about it now, like maybe later or in a week's time, I might start stewing over it again. And I can have a tendency to really overthink stuff like that and think, why was I like that, And just beat myself up about my past. I can be really hard on myself in that regard. So I think that's an aspect of like, just I need to surrender. I need to just understand that was my life and just let it go. It shaped me to who I am now. But don't be weighed down by what's already been forgiven.
Do you feel like you sometimes live in a state of regret?
Less so now, but man, before I did, yeah, it was like, it used to eat at me, dude. Like, I can't even explain the feeling I would get. I feel like the blood go to my head and I would just hate myself. And that's gotten less and less, but it still comes up every now and then. But I think like also just attachment to, like we're just talking about stuff like having my identity in God and not where my music goes. There's still elements of that still there. But I'm hoping to get to the point where that can completely disappear and there's none of that.
Yeah. CJ Bloomfield, the guy I spoke about a little bit earlier, the guy that was in solitary confinement, now an actor, obviously he had such a hectic upbringing and he had been through so many things that typically you're not proud of. And I asked him if he lived in does he have any regrets? And he said no. And I was fascinated to hear why. And the thing he said was that if you're truly proud of who you see in the mirror, you can't have regrets because every single thing, good or bad, has made you who you are today. So if you're proud of that person, everything good or bad has made that. So if you're proud of that person, then you can't have any regret. Yeah. And I went, holy shit, it's so true. If we are living in any state of regret, it means we're not truly proud of who looks back at us when we look in the mirror. So ultimately, we need to work on ourselves more. And it's not about forgiving ourselves and not living in this regret. It's actually just about bettering ourselves to the point that we're proud. And when we're proud of ourselves, we actually there's no space for regret. And it's such an empowering thought because like so many of us have regrets in our lives. And the only reason we regret is because we're not proud of who we are. And you proved that just before because you said, I used to have a lot of regrets. And the more you're progressing and on this upwards trajectory of where your life's heading, the less regret you have. And so it's a fascinating thing as we close out this conversation. But
I love that, man. I love that. That's so good. And I think like, what was I going to say? Yeah, like when I think back about my past and that, I would, like someone said, would you change anything? And it's like, I don't think I would because I like where my life is now and I like the direction I'm going. But if I had to do it over, would I do things differently? You know, like do you ever get that regret or guilt or shame or anything about anything?
Yeah,
from the
well,
past?
everyone would say, I think, everyone that gets asked, would they do things differently if they were living it again, would be yes. And the reason for that is because the only way you know if a decision's right or wrong is after making it and realizing whether it's right or wrong. So you learn along the way. The reason you made a decision in the moment is because you thought that was the right decision to make in that very moment. And so the only way you can change that is by living it and going, oh, I probably would do that a different way. There's living it differently if you got the opportunity to live it and feeling that as one thing. Most people would live their life differently if they were to relive it. But the reality is you can't relive it. It's happened. So if you're still living in that state of mind, that's where it's regret. And so it's because like you're regretting over something and it's like you can't change that. So you regret it. You can't actually relive it. And so I think there's a difference between regret and wanting to and reliving something in a different way. Regret's negative. Reliving something in a different way shows that you've grown.
That's a bar. Well
Yeah.
said.
I think we should wrap that up there. Is there anything else you want to share, promote before we wrap up the show, man? I really appreciate you coming on and it's been a pleasure talking to you over the last little bit.
Thank you so much for having me and appreciate you holding space for me when it got quite emotional there. I was not expecting that, but it happens, you know.
Yeah. And thank you so much. And I just want to commend you. I think being able to be vulnerable and open up about your challenges, as you said, you make the best music when you're in a low. So many people are going through challenges and they don't feel the courage to share them. And by you just doing that, you've helped so many more people than you realize because there's so many people going through hard times right now and that just makes them feel a little bit less alone. And it's a very hard thing to do. So I just want to commend you for being so open, being so vulnerable, and also just commend you for how much you've grown and all the work you've done on yourself to get you to where you are today. It's so cool.
Man, thank you.
And I think addiction and things really do spiral. And, you know, the more and more people I speak to, the more I'm realizing that like it's a very hard hole to climb out of after you've dug it. And to see that you're doing it and you're heading it face on like the boss of your own life that you are, it's very awesome and inspiring to see. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Man, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And if you guys have made it to the end, I'll leave all of 360's or Matt's details in the show notes in the description below. The new album is not out just yet, but
it's not
when's
out
it come
just
out?
yet. It comes out in July.
In July. Okay. But
Not meant to, I don't know if I'm meant to say that or not, but we'll just drop
if you've got an hour and a half into a podcast, then you'll know. Don't leak it. But yeah, I'll leave all of the details in the show notes description below. Go show some support, listen to the music, and go give them a follow on social media and stay up to date. And if you've made it to the end and you enjoyed this show, screenshot this and post it on your Instagram story and tag 360 and I, so we can show our appreciation that you've made it to the end and you enjoyed the show. And then leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, because it helps the show grow and it helps us keep getting amazing guests just like Matt back on the show so we can keep on growing together. I'm going to sign out for this week, but I'll see you next week.
Peace out.
See you guys.